Okay.
How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Data Lab here on the Sports Affiliation. This is where the Professor John Bush and I dig down into the data to hopefully make you a smarter fantasy football player. And joining me as he does each and every week here in the Data Lab. Hey, he's the one who built the Data Lab. We're working in his laboratory.
Okay.
It is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor, John Bush. And
Hey.
John, we have gone so deep diving into the various positions, but we have not talked wide receivers yet.
Yeah, and just to recap, folks, if you'll look at the other one, Data Lab, this is my counts over median. And Dennis, let's just reset what that's all about from your perspective and mine. I'll go first. Counts over median simply means that I grab a data from a bunch of, in this case, wide receivers, but all the positions, and I determine what the average weekly PPR, 1 point PPR fantasy points that are achieved by the median. Median means 50% of all the players sampled. And I then take that number as a ruler and compare everybody's weekly, 17 weeks, and just count the number of weeks above that and the ones below. And then I do some other manipulations of that count, but uh, obviously, players that are over that amount are consistent, right? And those that are under that uh, for a lot of weeks are inconsistent. It doesn't mean they're uh, not valuable. They could be a spiky player, right? Especially in best ball. They may have 3 super weeks and the rest of the time they're back in, right? They're a giraffe. Their neck is above the weeds for a few weeks and then they're gone. Versus there are those giraffes that they can't bend their neck, Dennis. They're stuck. So all the lions and tigers see that, okay, yeah, I see I got a giraffe I can go snack on over there, and they can't hide. So different player. And of course, there are some that they never get out of the weeds. We don't even want them on our team. So you kind of have 3 buckets, 3 flavors of players, super consistent, spiky players, consistent for a while. Maybe there's a run, maybe it's home, maybe it's away. And then there are those that are never really above the level and they're sad and we don't want them on our team at all. So, Dennis, what do you think about counts over median? You, you've you're the one who turned me on to that concept of consistency.
Yeah, and I love the way you look at this data using both your COM data and your Bush LR
Yeah,
figure, which is a little bit more
a
in
bit
depth.
better. Yeah.
It, all of our metrics that we use look at consistency from a slightly different way. My MVP looks at great games, around median games, and really lousy games because I believe that you don't want to have those guys that have those really bad games too often in redraft and in dynasty where you have to set a lineup. But the reason that we use multiple metrics is because we want to catch different players that have different identifying markers in the data. And it's not that I'm not convinced that one is definitely better at being predictive than the other at every position. That's number one. And number two, some of them are harder to calculate during a season. There's not enough data. So you look, my MVP data, I could sort of flop between two seasons and have it be a good metric to show a player's ability from one season to the next. And when I weight that data for the current season, as I do every year, I think it gives us a snapshot look at players and who are the risers, who are the fallers. But I'm convinced that both the COM and the Bush LR are probably the better way of looking at a player than either my MVP or my upside score that looks at their top games, their top third of their games. But all of those metrics have a value, and they might point out different players. And the idea is, can we be right often enough on liking a player more than the consensus? And if we can point out 2 or 3 or 4 players at each position using our different metrics and then combine the metrics, I think we get a safer player at the top end of the draft. And then lower portions of the draft, we might see a guy in the 7th, 8th, 9th round who really looks good, either in COM or Bush LR. Doesn't look good with my MVP data. But we see that he has a big spike in one of the data sets. That's a guy I'm going to bet on, because the data is spotting something in that player's performance that will give us a hint on how well that player will do going forward. But our strategies are very similar. We're looking at upside consistency. It's upside consistency.
Right.
There's a big difference.
Right.
But looking at it in different ways, I think, gives us an advantage of being able to spot different players.
Right. So this, Dennis, just starting since we're the data lab, let's look at data. This is at the population level. So in a philosophical way, I like to use this to look at populations and think about the total aspect of the position. And again, if that sounds different, it is different. I'm not saying it's popular. Okay, it's not popular because this kind of discussion is not clickable. People don't, because you don't have the secret sauce real quick, right? You don't, you can't eat the candy too quick. You got to wait, and nobody wants to wait for their fantasy football. They want it now, Dennis, and they want it extra. They want lots and lots of it. They're greedy, and it's like eating Cool Whip. It's fluffy, tastes good, but then after it's done, it's like, well, what did I eat? It's just fluffed air. And that's a lot of the click stuff. And I try to have some dense cheesecake, Dennis, that's sweet and it lasts, and you can go back and really satisfies. And so that's my philosophy, is the top down, and you look at the data. So this is the population, and the question I was just like to ponder is year one, is here it is right here, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then notice we kind of plateau. It's year 4, 6, and 7 are a lot like year 5's a little bit kind of the peak. And then we drop and then we bounce back up. And you're thinking, well, sounds like I should just wait till the wide receivers are 11 and 10. What you're not seeing is the population total is dropping, and there's not many left after 10 years in the league, Dennis. Their old bones have already been snapped too many times and they've been taken out, for the last hunt, old yellow, and, put down. And the only ones are the few ones that are the elites that, not in necessarily in skill, they're good, but they're just something genetically. They can, their joints and muscle, everything's lasting a lot longer than some of the ones that peaked early and then are gone. So this is kind of the career arc, I called it. And this is the so-called box and whisker. And I show you an example. And the line, and it's not easy to see here, the line here is median. That means 50% of the population is above or below that. In a perfect population, it's right in the center of the box. And don't worry that sometimes the population is not perfect, but that does tell you something else. And the folks that we want to live with are the top whisker. Those are the boom. Those are the boom players. We avoid the bust players right here. So we want to live at least median and above is what my com data is trying to measure. We want players that live in this world. We don't want a lot of players that live in below median and in the bust. So that's one thing. So this is just looking at the population. This is from 2015 to 2025. So it's about 10 years. So it you got enough data points here that tells you something. And some things that this tells me, Dennis, is first, the population is peaking, and point 0.5 is about 8 weeks above median. And the median is, I think, 10 or 11 points or something like that. So it's really, in some ways, that's not a lot, but it just shows you a lot of players are producing in year 5. That's their peak. And but notice that the biggest jump is from year 1 to 2. There's still a nice little jump from year 2 to 3, and that is different than running backs. We just saw that in our pre-show, Dennis. You and I discussed the career arc, and in running backs, year 3 is almost like year 2 and year 3 are about the same in year 4. You don't see a distinct pop here. This shows that. And with wide receivers, running backs, I think it's so much a demolition derby that you're either good out of the gate, especially by year 2, or you're not. So it's a different mindset in drafting wide receivers and run backs. You cannot draft them the same in overall philosophy. And so the biggest jump is still 1 to 2. It's not the 3-year breakout that people talk about. I call it the 2-year breakout. Second thing is these little dots or the outliers. These are so extreme. They're the 1 in 1,000 player. They only occur in the rookies. There are some wide receivers, rookies, Dennis, that are so damn good that they're just above the whisker. They're living in there's no air up there. It's just so rare. And there's a few of those that come along. There's 4 that's come along in 10 years as rookies. Look at that are just so amazing. And you see the same concept in running backs. So there's this rookies that are so good that they're above the rim. And most likely everybody knows that. And so maybe value wise, it's not there. Maybe in rookies, maybe the values in the upper whisker that people are so paying attention that they're missing some of these that are still damn good and are going to be really good in the career in the league here. So I'm going to stop and let you comment on the career arc here.
Yeah, this is great data. And if you look at those extreme guys above the whiskers,
Mhm.
they're not all the slam dunk top rookies that you think they should be, because if I look at my MVP data, the fourth best MVP data of all time since 2020, since I've been measuring it, among rookies was Puka Nacua, who was an extreme value guy. T.Y. Hilton with the Colts many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't considered to be the top wide receiver of the rookie class either. Brian Thomas was another guy who snuck in under the radar in that first year. So the rookie wide receivers that you think are going to be the slam dunk, can't miss guys are not always the first guy that comes to mind. Quite often they are. Odell Beckham Jr. had a 133 as a rookie in MVP. Malik Neighbors at 127, AJ Green 125. All of those guys were expected. So, and they paid off, but they were the extremes. And for every one of those extreme hits, you've got 7 or 8 over that course of time that were thought of as being hits right out of the box that failed miserably. So there are a lot of landmines at the wide receiver position among the rookies. So that's the first piece of data that I grabbed from this. The second is these year 4, year 5 guys that are living in the upper half of the box. So in other words, the top 25, above median and the whiskers. So you're talking the 50% above median. Those guys, they hold their form very nicely compared to other years. Rookie year, there's a lot of hit or miss. By the time a player establishes, and he's had several years in a row of being towards the upper part of the box or living in the whiskers, their chance of repeating is pretty high. So, and this data shows that maybe those 4 and 5 year guys, they can be some of the best values because they can be some of the more predictable guys, but they're no longer the shiny new object. So sometimes those players are getting ignored, like Chris Olave was last year. And those are the kind of guys we love because we know the odds when you get to year 4 or 5 are pretty solid. And if a player has shown that they belong, man, give me that guy because I'll take him. Year 4 for Olave last year, and he finally hit higher than what he was expected. His first 2 years, he was a pretty hot topic. He performed well, but he was about where you'd expect him to be. Year 4, for some reason, he got ignored. And look at that year 4. The data says that years 4 and 5, if we've got a guy we really like who's already performed, he's probably going to be performing at a high level again. And that's how we can use this data to understand that you don't have to be the shiny new thing at wide receiver. And then the final takeaway is just like the survivors at any position. I'm willing to take a chance on that guy if he's priced right. If I'm not having to overpay, I'm feeling pretty good. And yes, I'll step on the landmine every once in a while. But if I'm getting a guy 6th or 10th round and he falls off, he was my wide receiver 3 or 4 anyway. So I'm probably got some insurance above him, and I probably got some you know, guys that I put my faith in that are going to outperform their ADP. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'll
Yep.
take a chance on the old guy, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Something that I see later, if I'm a dynasty, looks to me, if you look at the whisker, look at the drop after year 8, near 9, 10, 11. It's different. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they're never the extreme that you see. I mean, really, the highest extreme is the rookie. We had a perfect year in year 3. Okay, that means they were above median the whole time. I mean, point 0.9 is pretty damn good. That's the upper 2 or 3 each year, Dennis. And you could have some in year 8. See that again, it's not the shiny, it's the same old stuff. Well, if you're a point 0.9 and you're the same old stuff, I'll take you. That's about 16 weeks above the median. Yeah, you can earn your living there, Dennis. But look at the drop off year 9. So if I'm a dynasty player, do you want to hold them to year 9 or 10? You better be really good, and your data, your diary needs to show that you're really good at the old timer whisper. You need to stay in the whiskers and your wide receivers, your older ones. Okay, it's easy to stay in the whiskers, young ones, but boy, the skill I think in the dynasty is keeping these the older dogs here. But I see this drop off here, year 8 and 9. Something's happening here, and again, there's fewer left, and those they're not performing like the years 8 and before.
And again, this leans right into how I play in Dynasty because I'm not one to trade a ton in Dynasty. I'm not always churning the top end of my roster.
Right.
What I am churning is the bench. And the guys that I like to get rid of on a team that I need to rebuild,
Right.
okay, are my 29 and 30-year-old wide receivers. I will get something for them before they hit that huge decline.
Think somebody like Mike Evans.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Evans would be a guy I would have gotten rid of. Now, here's the thing. If I have a winning team, I might stick around with that guy 1 year
Yeah,
too
it
late.
depends. Yeah.
And I'm okay with not getting value. For instance, one of the guys way back when that I did that with was Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
There came a point that you just couldn't get anything for Larry Fitzgerald,
Right.
but he was still producing at a flex level. I mean, he would have some good years for you, or some good weeks, I should say. Even when his play started declining, he was still giving you good value. So there comes a point in Dynasty, if I'm winning, that I haven't discarded the old guys. I will let them die on my roster
Gotcha.
because there comes a point where you just can't get much in return for them. And if I can't get a second round pick for a player, he's probably dying on my roster because I understand the the consistency of a guy that can produce enough positive weeks for you. But it is a real tricky case sometimes of understanding when to jump off of a guy and looking at this decline. My goodness, that's
Yeah,
scary.
yeah, you gotta live in the top and you got to have a track record. but the data is telling you that you better be real cautious. That the- You better take a nice ADP value, in these older guys here. So anyway, that just gives you a taste of the whole population. Uh, if I was using this, if you don't want to get too deep in the data, I would just categorize each wide receiver into what year they're coming into in the league. It's worth your time to do that. Just put them into a bucket and consider. Then you could come back and kind of look and see what this is telling you a little bit. And that's how I would look at it there. Another thing, Dennis, you'll have these metrics, but are they predictable year to year? I mean, part of it is we don't know 2026's data yet, right? So we're stuck looking at the last year, you and I even argue back class concept that we probably should write about that a little more, but we understand what that means, that players sometimes injury and just in the wrong, a poor team context, what Grok was saying in our introductory or our pre-show. Uh, Maybe they have an off year and they come back a little bit. It's rare, but it can happen. So predictiveness. And so how I do that is, I'm thinking I don't know if I'm gonna do a poster on this or not for the expo, but I might. What I do is I group the last year's wide receivers com scores into 6 buckets. Were their com score greater than or equal to zero point 0.8, 80% of the weeks. What is that? That's about 14 weeks, 60%, 40, 25, 10, or less than 10. And I group those and then ask the question, what did they do next? So I grouped into each bucket and grabbed then the next year's uh, production and dropped that into one of the 6 buckets. So Dennis, I have a 10-year uh, database. So that allows me to predict, like if I predict in 2015, I'm looking at 2016. What did 15 tell me about 16, right? Did the buckets pretty much line up or were they just random? If it was all random and no form held between year, then fantasy football might be luck. But the fact that I have shown that statistically it is not lucky. Good players tend to be good players the next year. And I think most people accept that, except when they're losing and then they're throwing their beer through the TV and they're mad and this is all luck. And so, yeah, so then I look at the predictiveness for next year and I look at the populations in these 6 buckets, Dennis, the best bucket, next best, and so forth. And you could look at where the whisker is. This is the bottom, and then the box, and then the median here, 0.7 here in the best. So the best players last year that were zero point 0.8, their next year median was 0.7. That's not bad. They lost a week on average. Uh, some of the best players kept that form, and some maybe even improved to 0.994. And then the almost great players from last year, they kind of held form, but notice that the range goes from zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.4. So now you better get some value if you're taking those. And notice the third year bucket, zero point 0.6 to zero point 0.2.
Oof.
Yeah. So, and then it gets worse from there. So you see this stair step that Dennis says that's usually a good sign. If it was random, Dennis, then pretty much these boxes would be at the same level and probably be very chaotic. You don't see that. In other words, good last year is probably saying they're good this year. Crappy last year, they're crappy this year on average. But notice the whiskers. See, there is some opportunity if you're that damn good to find some outliers. So there are a few that were crappy last year that do really good. So that's the ones that keep you going, Dennis. There's the extremes right here. Maybe it's opportunity. Maybe they're year 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. There is some improvement. They're out there. This shows they're out there, but on average, Dennis, you shouldn't expect it. But your diary, you can look at your track. Are you good at wide receivers and picking in the crap bucket? Are you able to find the pearl out there in with the pig's ear? And then you get the median of the buckets, and I've shown here 0.65, the next bucket 0.57, starting to drop, 0.4, 0.26, 0.18, 0.1, and it's going down, and that's what it shows. And then you ask the question, if I compare these averages in the groups, is these differences random or is this really statistically significant? It's called the analysis of variance statistic test. And the value here, the p-value, is a 1 to the minus 16th. That means that's the possibility that this is random. So there is no possibility that this stair step is random. It means good players are good players, and you can rely on that. And the statistics say that's true. And then you ask the question, median, which bucket is different from which bucket? And the best buckets are different. The best bucket here is statistically different than all the other buckets. So you can rely on these guys tend to be better than these, and these, and so forth. So this says statistically what you think and what you see is real, and there's no surprises. And this is really nice to know you're dealing with a stat that is predictable year to year. That means this gives you an opportunity, Dennis, to compare a ADP and look for those forgotten players or players that are undervalued. This gives us an opportunity to find some overlays.
And we always see those overlays because I think back to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who really came on at the end of his rookie year.
Right.
And a lot of folks were saying, oh, just small sample size, just a few games at the end of the year. And we looked at that and said, what if he does that all year long? Because he had a 69 in my MVP his rookie year. And I remember that second year, I probably had him on 80% of my teams because he was going under the radar and he made that big jump. Now, he wasn't trash. Like 69 on MVP is pretty close to your second level of guys. It's like right there. And so he had a good season. When I see a guy who's over 60 in MVP as a rookie at wide receiver, that opens my eyes to thinking this is a guy who's got a pretty good chance of increasing. Now, one guy who didn't was Darius Slayton. He fell off the top group or the second group, fell all the way down, about 2 groups farther down. So you're going to have some landmines every once in a while. But Tutoria McMillan last year was a 65 on MVP. I'm feeling pretty good about him being 85 or higher this season because I know that that's what players have done in the past.
And Dennis, the sample size for 10 years, this statistical test considers that. And if there was something going on with low sample, it would not be significant. It is built, analysis of variance is built to catch that. Okay, so you can't just have two samples compared to 100 samples and try to make some meaningful uh, conclusions. It's going to say we can't call it. You just got to go get more data. So just to let folks know, it's built into that. Yes. So if people only look year to year, 1 year, and then next year, and try to make some conclusions, that's tricky. That's why I look at 10 years. That's why Dennis is going back and looking at 5 years. We're trying to get these big data pools for us to make these conclusions.
And the idea is, again, we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to predict exactly where a player's com score is going to figure, lay out next year. All we got to do is be better than ADP.
Yes.
So if the ADP is saying that he's most likely to be in the third bucket, but our data is saying he's a second bucket guy.
Yes, ADP wise, yes.
So if he jumps up to the top bucket,
oh yeah,
we just got a bonus. We weren't really expecting.
Well, see, the top whisker in this data, Dennis, it's possible.
It's exactly the same. Yeah,
it's right there. If you're good enough, it's just it's rarer because when you put your hand in the bucket, you're coming out with crap in the third bucket a lot more than you're coming out with the pearl. And the highest chance you get a lot more pearls in the first bucket.
But if we are good at determining out of that third group, for instance, if we're able to say, okay, this 50% of this group, of this population, this 50% is more likely to rise than fall. Now I've got something. Yes. Now I've got some key value players that I can latch onto. And if the player goes way back up and is living in the whiskers, then we got a bonus. We just don't need it. We don't want them to fall. Like if we're grabbing somebody in that third group, we're okay if he's 0.4 or higher. Because that's what we expect.
40% of the weeks, right? So that's about 7 weeks.
And I can live with that. With a
at
guy
10 points.
I can live with a guy that's
or better.
That's in that group as my WR 3, 4, or 5. Because that's given me some options. And the key is if I'm right, and he has that upside potential. Maybe the upside is he goes from being a WR4 to being one of my starters. Yep. And that's how we can use this data. But if I'm looking at the ADP and two similar guys in ADP, that I'm taking in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, and I got a guy in that second bucket,
right?
The top half of the second bucket,
right,
in performance versus the top half of the third bucket. I'm betting on the second bucket guy, and the data says that I am smart to do that because if I'm just even close to being wrong, let's say he ends up at a 0.5, I'm still better than that third bucket. More than likely. I'm still competitive with my third bucket guys. That's how to use this data in a smart way, because the statistical tests tell you that these boxes are better than the better the box, the better the player for the next season. It doesn't mean
It's
everybody in that
no.
population,
Well,
but you have a,
look, you can have the best bucket, and point
oh yeah,
25 is,
yeah.
yeah, is a range of possibilities, Dennis.
Last year we had two classic examples of that with guys that performed well as rookies, Lad McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. Year two, they fell way off. So year three, what do? That's where it gets tricky, because we know
Mhm.
that they've been able to live in the top group. We know that they've been able to live in group 3 or 4. Now what do? Which is the real player? And that's where it gets tricky, because we've seen guys like T.Y. Hilton, who we already know the career arc. He went
Mhm.
from an MVP of 107, which is top bucket for you, down
Mhm.
to a 63 in the second
Mhm.
season, which is third bucket. And then he jumped back to a 100. So in year three. So he jumped back to the top bucket after being a third bucket guy.
Mhm.
And when we look at a player, we have to say, what caused that? Was there a difference in quarterback? Was there a difference in health of the player? Was there a difference in coaching? All of those things can come into play when determining who's more likely to be living in a different bucket.
And so this year, Dennis, and we're having a figure to add complexity, and that means the clickability of this is zero. Nobody wants to see this. That's fine. You and I will get to see it, and the few that are listening. Uh, don't you wish it was clean cut and everything was? It's not what this says. And I look between the years, the predictability of year 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so forth to year 6 to 10. And here's the six buckets. Look at year 1 to 2. Look at the top bucket. Look at the extreme box, how tall small the box is, the range of outcomes in that bucket. Wow. Versus the second bucket is actually a little tighter. So what's going on in this bucket and this year, look at year 2 to 3, is a lot more what you would predict, that the top bucket going into year 3 is more defined, that they're pretty good. Year 3 to 4, same thing. Notice year 4 to 5, they're starting to come together. Year 5 to 6, they're almost the same, Dennis. You can't tell them apart. But year 6 and out, the survivor starts catching up, and the top guys are superior again. So between the years and the age of the players, it's changing, and it's not one size does not fit all. So I added that complexity in the range of outcomes, Dennis, and I made my famous lollipop that we're going to look at after this. But I wanted to show behind the curtain a little bit that the complexity is really muffled. And look at year 4 to 5. Look at the third bucket, the box. It's almost hard to pull. It's like it's really hard to pull out who the best folks are. But the top bucket, the advantage is there's the downside is not very down. The other ones, they are really down. But the top is almost, it's the closest they've been except year 5 and 6. The second bucket's almost just a little bit higher. And the whiskers really higher too. So you cannot treat all wide receivers the same. I can say, okay, calm. I don't have to worry about the year they're coming to. I'm actually making more work for us, Dennis. But I think the lollipop is showing the range of opportunity. I call it age calm. So I'm now adding this data from now on to that, and it makes it less clear in some age buckets than others, and that's sad. I wish it was very clear throughout, and it's not. I wish they were all looking like kind of year 6 to 10. It would be very clear. We only stay in the two buckets. We don't ever dig past that. But you can see that third bucket can come into play. And so I guess the opportunity is there to find the pearl where everybody's not looking for it.
And it'll be interesting if we break down each year to see, okay, what caused that player to move up
Yeah, is
or
that
move down?
injury? Is that changing
Yeah,
teams?
yeah,
Yeah, free
and some
agents coming
yeah,
in, rookies coming in. Yeah,
very fascinating.
and so I tagged each player by their status, and then I had the average, the top of the box, and the median com data. I put them on a scale of 0 to 100. And lo and behold, what I get is the lollipop, Dennis, that you liked. And it shows the range of possibilities for the com data. And this is the top uh, wide receivers for 2026. And it's like, oh, okay, JSN is the best. No, what it says is he could be the best, but he could be as bad as fifth, maybe even sixth, maybe seventh or eighth. So there's a lot of variation here, but it kind of shows these top five are a lot alike, and it shows that St. Brown is the shortest lollipop, but he's his opportunity to be the number one is not as extreme as these four around him. Look at Chris Olave, has the opportunity to be the best in the league, or he could be, you know, fifth or sixth, seventh maybe. So we have to juggle that, and so it's not just a static point, Dennis. It is, in fact, a range, and this reminds us the range of probabilities, and we've got to think like that versus a static number.
Yeah, and I think that's very valuable to always look at the ranges. I remember last year when I looked at Jamar Chase, my concern was not Jamar Chase's numbers, it
Yeah.
was what is his numbers going to be without Burrow?
Yeah.
So that added even more uncertainty than you would have guessed just from his profile. But when we look at players for this year and we keep in mind where ADP is right now,
Mm-hmm.
we can get Chris Olave a lot cheaper than
Yep.
we can get the guys that are ahead of him
Yep.
on this chart. That to me is our value player.
What about
This
Rice though? Rasheed Rice has that
yeah,
opportunity.
yes. And here's a player that I am not certain what to do with heading into this season because I also expect that the Chiefs could add a wide receiver, not because Rashee Rice on the field is all that bad, but because he's had injury problems
Mm-hmm.
each of his first 2 years and off the field problems
Yeah.
each of his last 2 years. So that's a case where the data is
I'm
suggesting
not
he's,
measuring his, his
yeah,
bar brawls and things and his,
no,
personal
no,
life. Yeah.
no. And that's what I'm saying is this lollipop probably adjusts when we take the age comm
Yeah.
and then we add
I
the
need the
other
personality
levels.
comm,
Yeah,
the
we got to.
celebrity comm. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
will that force the hand of the Chiefs to bring in somebody else?
Yeah.
Is the big question, because if I'm looking at this data and I can put my guy in bubble wrap and make sure that nothing bad is going to ever happen to him,
Yeah.
then I know that I've got a valuable player. I got one of the top 3 guys in the league.
And look at the size of the lollipops, Dennis, in the top 20 or
Yes.
whatever. And last week we talked about tight ends, and I believe I showed you the top tight ends. Look
Oh
at the
yeah.
size of the lollipop,
Yes.
folks.
They're
When
huge.
I see this with tight ends, it's like, oh my God. This almost says that you take what you think is elite, or you can take a sucker and wait
Yes.
and potentially can get a good one. That is way different. The data, the range of outcomes is way different than the wide receivers, Dennis. And so that's telling you something else. The lollipop is revealing is, in some ways, a lot of these players are in the same tier. The tiers look
Yes.
bigger than I might think that they are. In other words, I think people are seeing differences. They're tricking themselves a little bit in the range of outcomes.
Yeah,
And
that's a
that's
good
to our
way.
advantage. That means we can take advantage of that.
Yeah, if I look at the top 3 players in MVP
Yeah.
from any given year, and I look at tight ends, I can vary between 160 and 70.
Wow.
That's
That's
huge.
crazy,
That's a
Dennis.
tight end. That's a tight end. If I look at wide receiver, I'm only varying between 160 and 130.
Dennis, that is the lollipop says that same story.
If I'm looking at running back, the
Mhm.
extremes are 125 to 160s.
A
And then
little
if
bit
I,
bigger,
yeah, a
but
little
not
bit
like
bigger.
tight end. Yeah.
No, and then I look at quarterback, it can go from 160 down to about 135.
Pretty
So
tight.
it's a lot tighter. Wide receivers and quarterbacks
Or
are
tight.
much tighter versus tight ends.
Yes. And
The
running
tight
backs are kind of a little bit looser, but not crazy like tight ends.
no, tight end is such an extreme position. That's why we're getting these huge lollipops versus wide receivers, where just based on the data,
Mhm.
just based on history, not even looking at changes on a team, changes with a player, injury concerns, all the other stuff, you start off with a much tighter range of outcomes. And when I look at this data, I'm thinking, okay, if JSN and Puka are gone, I'm pretty happy with Amon-Ra St. Brown,
Yes.
because
And
I
just licking
know,
my chops for Olave a
oh
little bit
yeah,
later,
I
right?
can get Olave in the second round.
So you could do Sun God and Olave. I think I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, and another guy that has a very, very narrow range of outcomes on the data is a guy that I am starting to look at more and more as that second guy in my wide receiver room,
Zay
is
Flowers.
Zay
Yeah,
Flowers.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's what the
because
lollipop says. Pretty tight.
very tight data, and then you look at the case where he's going to be on a different, it's like he's on a different team this year,
Yeah.
because we're going to change coaches and offensive coordinators. Now, that could be lower for his outcome, but probably is higher. You know, he's he's probably going to get more opportunities to be an elite guy. But if you look at his data, he's been 75, 75, 94 as MVP. I like
And we
that
know
tight
the
bracket.
career arc. Year 4, 5 is a little bit higher. 6, 7, dynasty wise, he could be good for the next 3 years.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at guys in MVP, I'm like, give me a team in Dynasty. Give me a team of all 80 plus guys. Because it's easier to build that in Dynasty than it is in redraft. In
Right.
redraft, you're kind of, you have to hit on guys. You can just hoard good
Right.
players in Dynasty over the years. So I'm looking at a guy like Zay Flowers. I might entertain the idea of trading for him.
Right.
Because I know that going forward, he's more likely to be above 80 than below 80 in my MVP data. And this is what the lollipop is telling you here is com data goes, he's about as guarantee as you can get. His value is at actual equal to Jamar Chase, who you'd have to spend the first or second pick on at wide receiver. That's the kind of guy that I'm really happy about getting as my secondary value guys. This is how I look at this data is I'm shopping for really solid value guys, and I'll let them beat me. I'll let the data beat me.
And something that since I have this data and folks don't, I can take my little bar, that's just kind of what I do, and I can move it around. And for instance, CD Lamb's top, and then I compare the other, 4 or 5, and it looks like for him to be number one, there would have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 failures.
Yes.
Is that probable that Sun God is going to have? I mean, it just looks to me like comparing those players, it would be hard to imagine CeeDee Lamb to be the number one this year. If you look at his bottom, look at who all could beat him. Oh man, he could. So this gives you guys, Dennis, you used to do that article, Hot or Not. I was looking back at some of our data. I miss those days. I know that was the summer. But this could be the basis for that a little bit, kind of the opportunity or kind of range of outcome, hot or not. People don't think about it quite like that. I think you put that down, you were already there, but I don't think you were thinking of it quite that way. This is a way use data to visualize the hot or not. And I would have a hard time envisioning CeeDee Lamb being the top wide receiver. He could be, theoretically, he could be the top, but boy, what's the possibility 5 other, JSN, Puka, Rice, Brown, Olave all fail, and CeeDee Lamb plays at his top this year, and he's still fighting with George Pickens, who is almost, for him to be number one, it would have to be about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players, maybe, Dennis, to fail before he could be number one. That's another way to use this data that, I get to do and people don't. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that idea. And that's what I try to do every year with my MVP data, where I'm forecasting the high and low for a player, because now I know where the range is. And at different times in the draft, I will look at that data in different ways. So when I'm looking at a player with a low, high range,
right,
I don't want to see that in the guy I'm taking in the first round. I want a sun god. I want even a Lave type of data set in a guy that I'm taking in the first round. Now, the joy with the Lave is you don't have to take him in the first round.
Right.
I can get him early second, mid second, and get a guy who is a better, who's more likely, has fewer negative outcomes than several guys who are going to go as the top 4 wide receivers in the draft.
Right.
To me, again, when we set up our sheet,
Yes,
our cheat
secret sheet. Yeah.
Our cheat sheet,
Yeah.
we're not necessarily looking to hit a home run with every player. What we don't want is to fall out.
Right.
And I will take a chance on a guy. Last year, the data that I put together and my high-low look would have said that Bijan Robinson was a better bet for that first pick in the draft than Jamar Chase.
Right.
And at wide receiver, we know that there's several guys that we really like. And another great way to use this data is I can look at a certain threshold value.
We could.
And I can say, give me every player who's above a 0.8, who's living in that 0.8 and above, or 0.75 and above income.
Yeah.
Where the total lollipop is all above that area. And now I can set out my ADP and I can highlight those guys.
Yeah.
And I know at any given position.
Yeah.
In any point
and Dennis, we're going to have that sheet in at the draft night out. And folks, if your eyes get on the stalk and start looking, we've got the buffalo sauce bottle next to us. What we will do is take that and spill it on our cheat sheet, and that gets rid of the data. So don't make us go to that option. So because we'll have to have a secret copy somewhere else. But Dennis, or maybe even make a fake copy. We'll either do the buffalo sauce option and, oops, I spilled it on my good cheat sheet. Your head on a swivel there, looking a little too much, trying to cheat. People would do that, Dennis.
Yes, they do.
I had one young lady, she was pretty, and I didn't mind her cheating. She would grab my answer sheet when the old teacher did look in chemistry and put it over there and copy as many as she could, and then give me my answer sheet back. And I was just like, man, things I do to try to get a date here, it's crazy, risk it. But when the attractive young lady is grabbing your chemistry test, and what do you do, Dennis? What do you do? But anyway, don't make us use the buffalo wing sauce on our cheat sheet, folks, at Dynasty Night Out. We're going to be hiding. You're not going to know. I'm not going to wear my Professor Regalia, and Dennis is not going to wear his lab coat with the red tie. Okay, we're not going to be these people you see. We're going to be in our secret disguise. So don't think about it this year, Dennis. Don't tell them no. Get a fly swatter and pop their hand back. They start looking at our cheat sheet.
Oh, we have it coded in such a way, folks, that we're probably the only ones who can decipher it on the fly. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can check out all the articles, talk about the different methodologies that we use. But the counts above median data, Professor, I love these lollipops because it gives you that feeling of uncertainty. It lets you know where the uncertainty lies in a draft and at a position. And that is a big advantage going forward. So head on over to the Science of Fantasy Football. Also check out the Science of Fantasy Football podcast, our sister podcast, and come on back here to the Sports Affiliation next week for another edition of the Data Lab.
Get to work, folks.